The underworld bowed to Dominic Castiglione, a ruthless alpha who ruled the city's shadows. But when the fearsome Mafia boss noticed a terrified, sweet-scented Omega boy desperately trying to conceal deep purple bruises beneath his collar, his blood ran cold. What Dominic did next didn't just exact revenge, it ignited a war that burned the city to the ground. Dominic Castiglione did not become the head of the Castiglione syndicate by missing the small details. He was a prime alpha, a man whose very presence demanded submission. The air in the VIP lounge of the Sapphire Room was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, top-shelf bourbon, and the heavy, musky pheromones of powerful alphas conducting illicit business. Yet piercing through the haze of smoke and corruption, a distinctly fragile scent caught Dominic's attention. It was subtle, wild honey and rain, but it was souring at the edges with the unmistakable metallic tang of raw terror. Dominic leaned back into the plush leather of his booth, his sharp amber eyes tracking the source. It was the new server. His name was Liam O'Connor. He was young, perhaps barely 22, with a mop of unruly chestnut curls and wide emerald green eyes that constantly darted toward the exits. He was an Omega. It was obvious to Dominic, even though the boy was clearly drowning himself in cheap over-the-counter scent blockers that smelled faintly of sterile bleach. In the brutal hierarchy of the city, unregistered Omegas like Liam were prey forced to hide their nature to avoid being trafficked or indentured to elite families. Liam approached Dominic's table, balancing a silver tray with a fresh bottle of scotch and 2 crystal glasses. His hands were trembling. As he reached over to set the glasses down, the cuff of his oversized, stark white uniform shirt rode up his forearm. Dominic's gaze snapped to the boy's wrist. There, stark against Liam's pale skin, was a vicious constellation of bruises. They were in varying stages of healing, some a sickly yellow-green, others a violent, blooming purple. More importantly, the bruising pattern on the wrist was unmistakable. It wasn't from a fall. It was a handprint. Someone had grabbed the Omega with enough bone-crushing force to leave a permanent reminder of their strength. "Pour it," Dominic commanded, his voice, a low, gravelly baritone that made the other mobsters at the table fall silent. Liam flinched, a full-body shudder that spiked his honeyed scent with a sharp wave of distress. Yes, sir." Liam stammered, his fingers fumbling with the heavy glass bottle. As Liam leaned closer, the top button of his stiff collar strained. Dominic's eyes narrowed fractionally. Just beneath the line of the collar, creeping up the delicate column of the boy's neck, was the edge of another bruise. This one was darker, uglier. A thumbprint resting dangerously close to the Omega's scent gland. A primal, violent roar echoed in Dominic's mind, the alpha instinct flaring to life with a sudden, terrifying intensity. The syndicate boss had seen murder, torture, and extortion. He had ordered hits without batting an eye, but the sight of this innocent, untouched Omega being systematically battered awoke a territorial rage he hadn't felt in a decade. "Who did that?" Dominic asked. The question was quiet, but it sliced through the ambient noise of the club like a straight razor. Liam froze the bottle, hovering inches above the glass. The color drained completely from his face. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Castiglione." "Your wrist," Dominic said, leaning forward. The ambient temperature in the room seemed to drop as Dominic released a fraction of his own alpha pheromones, a heavy, suffocating scent of cedar and wood smoke that commanded absolute truth. "And your neck, you're bruised, Liam. Who put their hands on you?" "I fell," Liam whispered, his voice cracking. He hastily yanked his sleeve down, nearly dropping the bottle of scotch in his panic. "I'm clumsy, sir. The stairs at my apartment, they're steep." A fall doesn't leave finger marks. Arthur Penhaligon. Dominic's underboss noted quietly from across the table, his own eyes studying the terrified boy. I have to get back to the bar. Liam gasped, bowing his head, submissively, desperate to escape the crushing weight of Dominic's gaze. Please excuse me. Without waiting for a dismissal, the Omega practically fled across the carpeted floor, disappearing behind the heavy velvet curtains that led to the staff quarters. Dominic watched him go, the muscle in his jaw ticking. The scent of the boy's fear lingered in the air, a phantom plea for help that Dominic could not ignore. Arthur. Dominic said, his voice deadly calm. He didn't take his eyes off the curtain where Liam had vanished. Boss, Arthur replied, sitting up straighter. Cancel the meeting with the Russian delegates tomorrow. I have a new priority. Dominic took a sip of the scotch. Liam had poured the liquid burning down his throat. I want a full background check on Liam O'Connor by midnight. Find out where he lives, who he associates with, and who holds his debts. And Arthur. Yes, Dominic. Put 2 of our most discreet shadows on him when his shift ends. If anyone approaches him on his way home, I want to know about it. If anyone lays a hand on him... Dominic's amber eyes flashed with a lethal promise. Break their arms. Dominic knew the city was a meat grinder, indifferent to the suffering of the weak. But as he inhaled the lingering sweet scent of the bruised Omega, he made a silent vow. Whoever was using Liam as a punching bag was going to learn a very painful lesson about taking things that belonged to the Castiglione family. Dominic hadn't claimed the boy yet, but in his alpha mind, the decision was already finalized. Liam was his to protect, and the streets would run red before he let another bruise bloom on the boy's skin. The rain was falling in unforgiving sheets across the Oakhaven district, washing the grime of the city into the gutters, but it couldn't wash away the stench of betrayal. It was 2 a.m. Dominic stood in the shadows of an abandoned alleyway, the collar of his trench coat turned up against the chill, listening to the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the pavement. Arthur approached his footsteps, silent, despite the puddles. He held a manila folder, shielded beneath an umbrella. You were right, boss, Arthur said, his voice grim. The boy didn't fall down any stairs. Dominic snatched the folder, stepping deeper into the shadows, where a flickering street lamp provided just enough light to see the photographs inside. The images were taken an hour ago, outside a crumbling tenement building on 4th Street. They showed Liam drenched in rain, cornered against a brick wall, by a tall, broad-shouldered alpha. The man had a hand wrapped violently around Liam's throat, lifting the boy onto his toes. His name is Finn O'Connor, Liam's older brother. Arthur explained, pointing to the aggressor in the photo. Finn is a registered alpha, supposed to be Liam's legal guardian since their parents died. But Finn has a gambling problem, a severe one. Dominic traced the terrified expression on Liam's face in the photograph, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Who does he owe? That's where it gets complicated, Arthur sighed. He owes Vincent Romano. Dominic's head snapped up. The Romano family was the Castiglione's biggest rival. Vincent Romano was a degenerate who specialized in underground fighting rings and worse, illegal Omega trafficking. It gets worse, Arthur continued, his tone hardening. Finn isn't just paying off his debts with cash. He's been keeping Liam completely unregistered and isolated. We intercepted a burner phone conversation between Finn and one of Romano's lieutenants. Finn is grooming his own brother. He's beating the boy into submission, breaking his spirit so he won't fight back when Finn sells him to Romano to clear a $50,000 debt. The handover is supposed to happen this Friday at the docks. The folder crumpled in Dominic's massive hand. The sheer depravity of it, A brother selling his own blood and alpha, betraying the most sacred duty of protection, was a crime that demanded absolute destruction. Finn wasn't just abusing an Omega. He was feeding an innocent to a monster. "Where is Liam right now?" Dominic demanded, his voice a lethal whisper. "He just finished his shift. He's walking toward the 4th Street station. Finn is waiting for him at the apartment. Finn will have an empty home tonight," Dominic stated, turning on his heel. "Bring the car around. We're intercepting the boy." 10 minutes later, Liam was trudging through the heavy rain, shivering violently beneath a threadbare jacket. His scent was entirely muted by the cold and his own exhaustion. He kept his head down, dreading the moment he would have to turn the key in his apartment door. Finn had been in a foul mood all week, and the bruises on Liam's ribs from 2 nights ago still screamed with every breath. Suddenly, a sleek, bulletproof black sedan pulled up alongside the curb, blocking his path. Liam froze, his heart hammering against his bruised ribs. He stumbled backward, ready to bolt, but the rear door opened. Dominic stepped out into the rain. He didn't rush. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of an apex predator, his imposing frame blocking Liam's escape route. "Mr. Castiglione!" Liam gasped, wiping wet hair from his eyes, terrified that he had somehow offended the mob boss at the club. "I'm sorry I don't have any money." "Get in the car, Liam," Dominic said softly. It wasn't an order. It was a plea draped in velvet. "I can't. My brother. Finn, he's waiting for me. If I'm late, he'll—" Liam choked on the words, his hands coming up to instinctively protect his face. Dominic stepped closer, ignoring the rain soaking his expensive suit. He slowly reached out, telegraphing his movements so he wouldn't startle the boy, and gently cupped Liam's cold, wet cheek. The warmth of the Alpha's hand sent a shockwave through Liam. It was the first time an Alpha had touched him without the intent to cause pain. "I know about Finn," Dominic said, his amber eyes locking onto Liam's tear-filled green ones. "I know about the debt, and I know about Vincent Romano." Liam stopped breathing. A sob tore from his throat, a sound of absolute wretched despair. The secret he had bled to keep was out. He thought Dominic was here to collect him, to do Romano's job for him. He sagged his legs, giving out, but Dominic caught him effortlessly pulling the small Omega against his broad chest. Dominic enveloped him, flooding the rain-slicked street with his rich protective cedar scent. It wrapped around Liam like a heavy, warm blanket, triggering an instinctual Omega response. Liam buried his face in Dominic's coat, weeping uncontrollably, his fingers gripping the lapels of the Mafia boss's suit as if he were a drowning man holding onto a lifeline. "You are not going back to that apartment," Dominic murmured, resting his chin on the top of Liam's wet curls. "You are never seeing Finn again. And if Vincent Romano thinks he can lay a finger on what is mine, I will burn his entire empire to ash." He lifted Liam into his arms, carrying the exhausted, sobbing boy into the warmth of the sedan. As the car sped away toward Dominic's impenetrable penthouse, the Alpha looked out the window into the dark, stormy city. The lines had been drawn. The city was going to wake up to a massacre, and Dominic would not stop until the streets were paved with the bones of every man who had ever made Liam O'Connor bleed. Liam awoke to the sensation of absolute weightlessness. For a terrifying, disorienting second, he thought he had died and slipped away into some ethereal afterlife. There was no biting chill of his drafty apartment, no damp mattress, and most miraculously, no looming scent of stale beer and alpha aggression that always preceded his brother's violent outbursts. Instead, Liam found himself cocooned in 1,000-thread-count fret linens, sinking into a mattress that felt like a cloud. The air in the sprawling room was perfectly climate-controlled and steeped in the rich grounding aroma of cedar wood smoke and a hint of expensive bergamot. It was Dominic Castiglione's scent, wrapping around the traumatized Omega like an impenetrable fortress. Panic, deeply ingrained and instinctual, flared in Liam's chest. He scrambled backward against the tufted velvet headboard, his emerald eyes darting wildly around the room. The space was a masterclass in modern luxury floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, sleek mahogany furniture, and a massive, roaring fireplace. But to Liam, a lifetime of abuse had taught him that beautiful cages were still cages. He instinctively reached for his scent blockers, but his pockets were gone. He was wearing an oversized, obscenely soft cashmere sweater that smelled intensely of the Mafia boss. "Breathe, little one. You are safe." The voice was a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. Dominic stepped out of the shadows near the balcony doors, holding a steaming mug of tea. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the corded muscle of his neck. His amber eyes were soft, completely devoid of the terrifying predator's edge he had displayed on the street. "Mr. Castiglione," Liam croaked, his throat raw. He tried to scramble out of the bed, his training demanding he stand and submit, but a sharp pain in his bruised ribs made him gasp and collapse back against the pillows. Dominic was across the room in a fraction of a second, setting the mug down on the nightstand and gently pressing a large, warm hand against Liam's uninjured shoulder to keep him still. "Don't move. You have 2 fractured ribs, severe malnutrition, and a hairline fracture in your left wrist. I had Dr. Harrison Gray flown in from the Mount Sinai private concierge wing at 3 in the morning to look you over while you slept. You are in my penthouse, heavily guarded. No one is coming through those doors." Liam stared at the Alpha, trembling. Why are you doing this? I don't have anything to give you. If this is about Finn's debt to Romano..." "Finn's debt is irrelevant to me." Dominic interrupted, smoothly, his thumb subconsciously stroking the fabric of the sweater near Liam's collarbone, entirely avoiding the bruised skin. "What matters to me is that a rare, unregistered Omega was being tortured in my city, right under my nose. What matters is the scent of honey and rain that has been driving my alpha instincts insane since you walked up to my table." Liam's breath hitched. "You want to claim me?" he whispered, terrified. In Liam's world, an alpha's claim was a death sentence to freedom. "I want to protect you," Dominic corrected, firmly pulling back just enough to give Liam space. "I am not your brother, and I am certainly not Vincent Romano. I do not take what isn't freely given. You will stay here in the guest wing until you are healed. You will eat, you will rest, and you will learn what it feels like to live, without looking over your shoulder." Before Liam could process the sheer magnitude of that promise, heavy footsteps approached the bedroom doors. A sharp double knock echoed through the room. "Enter!" Dominic commanded, his posture instantly shifting back to the hardened syndicate boss. Arthur strode into the room, his face an unreadable mask of lethal professionalism. He offered a curt, respectful nod to Liam before turning to his boss. "Dominic, we have a situation. Finn O'Connor just tore apart the Waldorf Astoria underground poker room looking for his brother. He's panicking. Romano's men sent him a final warning if he doesn't deliver the Omega by midnight. Tomorrow at Pier 44, they are going to flay him alive." Dominic's eyes darkened the cedar scent in the room, spiking with a sharp, metallic edge of alpha fury. Liam whined softly at the sudden shift in pheromones, pressing his hands over his ears. Instantly realizing his lapse in control, Dominic reined in his aura, directing a soothing wave of calm toward the bed. "What else did you find, Arthur?" Dominic asked coldly. "A rat like Finn doesn't operate in a vacuum." "You were right to dig deeper," Arthur replied, pulling a heavily encrypted tablet from his jacket. Finn didn't just hide Liam from the registry, he paid a corrupt associate at the Coots offshore banking division to funnel Romano's dirty money under Liam's name. Finn forged Liam's signature on a dozen shell company documents. If Liam ever went to the authorities for the abuse, Finn had it set up, so Liam would take the fall for Romano's money laundering ring. It was a perfect, inescapable trap. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. His own brother hadn't just beaten him, he had actively framed him to be a sacrificial lamb. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical blow. A choked, broken sob escaped Liam's lips, his hands curling into the luxurious bedding. Dominic slowly turned to look at the weeping Omega, his jaw set so hard it looked carved from granite. He reached out gently, wiping a tear from Liam's cheek with his thumb. "Arthur." Dominic said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper that promised rivers of blood. "Prepare the men. Empty the armory. Tomorrow night at Pier 44, we aren't just intercepting a handover." Dominic stood up, his massive frame blocking out the morning sun, casting a long, dark shadow across the room. "We are going to eradicate the Romano family from the face of this earth. And when I find Finn O'Connor, I am going to make him pray for an end he will not receive." Midnight at Pier 44 was a desolate, unforgiving landscape. Thick, soupy fog rolled off the freezing waters of the harbour, mingling with the relentless icy drizzle. The only illumination came from the sickly yellow glow of a few rusted sodium lamps and the sweeping beams of a nearby lighthouse. The rhythmic slapping of waves against the wooden pylons sounded like a ticking clock counting down to a slaughter. A sleek, heavily armoured Mercedes Maybach G650 idled near the edge of the pier, its engine a low, menacing purr. Standing a few yards away from the vehicle, shivering so violently his teeth chattered, was Finn O'Connor. He looked pathetic. The cocky, abusive alpha who had terrified Liam was now reduced to a twitching, terrified wreck. He kept checking his Rolex, a cheap counterfeit, much like his bravery, and peering into the suffocating fog. The heavy bulletproof door of the Maybach swung open. Vincent Romano stepped out. He was a stocky, vicious man with a jagged scar running down his jawline, smoking a thin cigar. He was flanked by 4 heavily armed enforcers, carrying Heckler and Koch submachine guns. "You're alone, Finn," Romano observed, his voice a raspy sneer. He took a slow drag of his cigar, his eyes scanning the empty shadows. "Where is the sweet little Omega you promised me? You said he was broken. You said he was ready." Finn swallowed hard, taking a terrified step back. "Mr. Romano, please. I swear to you I had him locked up. But he ran. He must have slipped out the fire escape while I was asleep. Give me 2 more days. I'll track him down. I'll drag him here by his hair if I have to." "I don't do extensions," Romano interrupted, casually flicking the glowing ash of his cigar onto the wet concrete. "You owe me 50 grand, Finn. You tried to pay me with a ghost. Now you pay with blood." Romano nodded to his men. The enforcers raised their weapons, the sharp clack of rounds being chambered, echoing loudly over the sound of the crashing waves. Finn dropped to his knees, screaming and holding his hands up in a futile plea for mercy. Suddenly, a deafening crack shattered the night. The enforcer standing closest to Romano dropped instantly, a heavy-caliber sniper round from the darkness, neutralizing him before he could pull his trigger. Before Romano or his surviving men could react, blinding military-grade floodlights snapped on from the roofs of the surrounding shipping containers, pinning the Romano cartel in a glaring circle of stark white light. Out of the fog, walking with the slow, terrifying confidence of the Grim Reaper himself, came Dominic Castiglione. He was flanked by Arthur and a dozen of his own elite syndicate soldiers, all armed with matte black Glock 19 pistols and tactical rifles. Dominic didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. His very presence, the overwhelming, suffocating crush of his prime alpha pheromones, forced the remaining Romano men to their knees, gasping for air as their instincts demanded submission. "Dominic Castiglione!" Romano spat, clutching his coat, though his eyes betrayed his rising panic. "This isn't your territory. This is a private transaction. You are standing in my city, Vincent," Dominic said, his voice echoing smoothly across the wet pavement. "Breathing my air, and attempting to buy an Omega that belongs to me." Finn's head snapped up from the puddles, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Liam. You have Liam." Dominic's gaze shifted to Finn, and the temperature on the pier seemed to plummet. "I do. And I saw the bruises you left on him. I saw the handprints." "Castiglione, you want the boy? Keep him?" Romano shouted, trying to salvage the situation. "But Finn owes me you're breaking the cartel truce over a street rat." "I am breaking the cartel," Dominic corrected softly. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to Arthur. The docks erupted into a brief, violent symphony of gunfire. Dominic's men moved with lethal surgical precision. Within 10 seconds, Romano's enforcers were disarmed and incapacitated. Romano himself took a grazing shot to the shoulder, crying out in pain as Arthur kicked his legs out from under him, forcing the rival boss face down onto the freezing concrete. Dominic didn't even flinch at the gunfire. He walked slowly toward Finn, who was now sobbing hysterically, crawling backward until his back hit a rusted shipping container. "Please, Mr. Castiglione. He's my brother. I raised him." Finn begged, tears streaming down his face. "You broke his ribs. You starved him. You planned to sell him to a monster." Dominic listed his voice eerily calm as he stood over the pathetic alpha. Dominic slowly removed his leather gloves, tucking them into his coat pocket. "In the Castiglione family, we believe in proportional justice. You used your hands to hurt what is mine. You won't use them again." Dominic stepped back. Two of his massive enforcers hauled Finn to his feet, dragging him toward the edge of the pier. The screams that followed were quickly swallowed by the roaring waves, and the heavy fog ensuring Finn O'Connor would never lay a finger on another living soul for the rest of his miserable life. An hour later, the penthouse was quiet. The roaring fireplace cast a warm, flickering glow over the living room. Dominic stepped out of his private elevator, stripping off his damp, blood-spattered coat and leaving it by the door. He washed his hands meticulously in the powder room, scrubbing away the smell of gunpowder salt and violence. When he finally walked into the main living space, he froze. Curled up on the plush leather sofa, swathed in a heavy blanket, was Liam. The Omega was fast asleep, breathing deeply, his delicate features finally relaxed. The air was no longer tainted with the sour, metallic tang of distress. Instead, the penthouse was completely saturated with the intoxicating, pure scent of wild honey and rain. It was the scent of an Omega who finally felt safe. Dominic approached quietly, kneeling beside the sofa. As if sensing the Alpha's protective presence, Liam shifted blindly, reaching out from beneath the blanket. His small, uninjured hand found Dominic's wrist, gripping it loosely. Liam leaned his face into Dominic's palm, sighing softly in his sleep. The ruthless Mafia boss closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the boy's soft curls. The city outside was burning with the consequences of his actions, a war tearing through the underworld. But inside this room, bathed in the scent of honey and cedar, Dominic had found his peace. He had found his heart. Dominic risked his entire empire and sparked a brutal Mafia war, but seeing Liam finally safe in his arms makes every drop of blood spilled worth it. From a bruised, terrified server to the fiercely protected mate of the city's most powerful alpha, Liam's journey is the ultimate story of survival and love. Did you gasp at Dominic's ruthless revenge? Let us know your favorite moment in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, heart-pounding Omegaverse audio dramas.